Hi, and welcome to Reddit Confessions. If you've ever watched the person you love set fire to everything you built together, with a smile on their face, then buckle in. Because this story, it didn't begin with cheating. It began with a dare. Not from her friends. Not from some stranger online. From her own mouth. It was 6:37 p.m. on a Thursday. I remember because I had just burned my tongue on a spoonful of reheated chili. She was on the couch, scrolling through her phone like always, when she looked up, out of nowhere, and said it. I bet I could find a fling in 10 minutes if I wanted to. No warning. No context. No shame. Just that. She wasn't angry. She wasn't drunk. She wasn't joking. She said it like someone pointing out the weather, casual, cruel, and with the confidence of someone who knows exactly what game they're playing. And me? I just blinked. For a second, I thought maybe she was quoting a meme or making a weird joke. But no, she stared right at me, daring me, testing me, like she wanted to see how far she could push before I broke. And that's when I said it, low, quiet, and for the first time in our entire marriage, without hesitation. I can find a lawyer in 5. She froze. Not flinched. Not laughed. Froze. Like the words had landed harder than she expected. Like she hadn't actually prepared for me to fire back. She blinked twice, put her phone down slowly, and just stared. And in that silence, in that exact moment, I saw something I hadn't seen in years, fear. Not because I'd threatened her, but because I finally meant it. You see, our marriage hadn't been a battlefield. It had been a slow suffocation. A polite performance of two people pretending to still be in love for the sake of routines and mortgage payments. She stopped kissing me goodnight 2 years ago. I stopped asking where she was going last spring. And somewhere between her weekend wellness retreats and my late-night solo dinners, we became roommates playing spouses. But that sentence, that tiny sentence, I can find a lawyer in 5, shattered the illusion. She stood up, grabbed her coat, and left without a word. And me? I just sat there, watching the door, knowing something had shifted. Not out there. In me. And the craziest part? She was right. She could find a fling in 10 minutes. Because as I would soon find out, she already had. Not 1, not 2, but 3. And one of them was someone I used to call family. I didn't sleep that night. Not out of anger. Not even from sadness. But because every corner of my house suddenly felt unfamiliar. Like I was living in a memory someone else had designed. The throw pillows she picked out. The scent of her vanilla lotion still lingering in the hallway. The half-folded laundry on the bed we no longer shared. Everything screamed her, and none of it felt like us anymore. She didn't come home that night. Or the next one. No calls. No texts. Just silence. And in that silence, something in me shifted. Not all at once. Not like in the movies where the betrayed husband storms off with a suitcase and a righteous speech. I didn't even move from the living room couch for hours. But the next morning, I walked into the garage, stood in front of her car, and stared at it like it held secrets. Because something had changed recently. She used to leave her keys on the hook by the door. Now they were always in her purse. Her scent changed. Her playlist changed. Her patterns, subtle, but there, had shifted just enough to raise questions I had ignored out of fear of the answers. And so, I opened the glove compartment. I don't know what I expected. Maybe old receipts, tissues, some expired gum. But instead, I found a sleek little burner phone. Matte black. No lock screen. Just a quiet, blinking screen that said, one new message. My hands were shaking before I even touched it. The message read, still thinking about last weekend. Let me know when he's gone again. I froze. For a long, long time. The message wasn't signed. No name. No emoji. Just cold intimacy. But when I opened the thread, it was all there. Weeks of back and forths. Pictures. Times. Details. Some of it took place while I was at work. Some while I was upstairs in the same damn house. And some during the funeral of her aunt. The one she said she was flying alone to comfort. Turns out, he had been with her in that hotel room. And here's the part that twisted the knife. It wasn't just one guy. She had names saved under stupid nicknames. Yogi Bear, Drummer Boy, Blue Eyes. It was like reading fanfiction written by a woman I didn't recognize. She was flirty, ruthless, proud. She bragged about how easily I fell for her excuses. How I still brought her flowers even though she forgot our anniversary. How I made life easy so she could chase fire elsewhere. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the phone. I just placed it back where I found it, closed the glove box gently, and sat in the driver's seat of her car for almost an hour. I kept waiting for the grief to crash into me, but it never came. What came instead was a quiet, bone-deep clarity. She hadn't just cheated. She had abandoned me long before the texts. Emotionally, intimately, truthfully, and I had let her. That night, she walked back into the house like nothing happened. Hair curled, nails freshly done, purse slung casually over her shoulder like she hadn't vanished for 48 hours. I asked her how her hike went. She smiled and said, "Cleared my head." And I smiled back, because by then, I'd already spoken to an attorney. And the look on her face the next morning, when she saw the envelope on the table, wasn't confusion. It was recognition. She didn't even pick up the envelope right away. That surprised me. It was sitting there, plain as daylight, right in the center of the kitchen table, a neatly sealed manila folder with her name written in my clumsy handwriting. Inside, divorce paperwork, half filled out, and a polite little yellow sticky note that read, "Since you wanted excitement, I thought I'd save you some time." I was in the hallway, pretending to fiddle with the hallway light switch when she walked in. I watched from the corner of my eye as she approached the table. She stood there for a solid 30 seconds, just staring at it. No touch, no questions. She just stared. Then, and I swear this was the moment I realized I no longer knew who she was, she laughed. A soft, arrogant, almost amused laugh. As if to say, "You're serious? You really think you're going through with this?" Then she picked it up, peeled off the sticky note, read it, and walked right past me into the bedroom without saying a word. No yelling, no explanation, no denial, just silence and the sound of her heels tapping across the hardwood floor. I stood there like an idiot, heart pounding, waiting for the inevitable blow-up. But none came. No door slam, no sobbing, just the quiet rustle of clothes hangers and zippers. She came out 10 minutes later in a silk robe, hair tied up, makeup gone, completely calm. She tossed the envelope onto the couch and said, "You really want to do this? Or is this your version of a tantrum?" A tantrum. That word hit me harder than any confession ever could. You'd think after discovering she'd been having multiple affairs, including one during a funeral trip, I'd have the upper hand. That she'd at least have the decency to act sorry. But no. She was still playing chess while I was trying to find where the board even was. She sat down across from me, legs crossed, and said, "We're not kids, Daryl. You don't throw away a marriage over a few slip-ups. You think you're going to find someone else at your age? Someone who'll tolerate your moods, your snoring, your sad little comfort zone routine? Be serious." I wish I could tell you I stood up and delivered some bold, spine-tingling speech. That I told her off. But I didn't. I just sat there, swallowing the lump in my throat and trying not to look as small as I felt. Because deep down, I still couldn't believe it. I still wanted her to say, "I'm sorry. I screwed up. I'll fix it." Instead, she looked me in the eye and said, "Do what you have to do. But don't pretend you didn't enjoy being the safe option." That one sentence broke something inside me. Because in her mind, I wasn't the betrayed husband. I was the boring background character who'd been lucky to even be chosen. Someone who made her life easier, not richer. And now that she'd had her taste of chaos, she saw me as disposable, replaceable. But what she didn't know, what she never saw coming, was that I had already packed my bags. Not just physically, emotionally. For the first time in over a decade, I wasn't clinging. I wasn't begging. I wasn't waiting for her to choose me. I was choosing myself. And just as I stood up to leave the room, she said one last thing. "You'll come crawling back. You're not built for loneliness." I didn't answer. I just walked out, car keys in hand, my heart heavy but strangely steady. What I found out the next day, though, the real twist, came from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Someone who had been watching her far more closely than I ever could. And what they told me, it made everything I thought I knew look like a lie wrapped in a bigger lie. The call came while I was sitting in the parking lot of a grocery store, gripping a cart handle like it was some kind of anchor to keep me from drifting out into open water. I hadn't even meant to go inside. I just needed to be somewhere that wasn't my driveway, staring at the house I no longer believed was mine. My phone rang. An unknown number. Normally, I wouldn't have answered. But my soul was so bruised and frayed by that point. I think I needed someone, anyone, to say my name. "Daryl?" The voice was cautious, familiar. I froze. Who is this? It's Naomi, Curran's sister. That hit me harder than I'd like to admit. Naomi and I hadn't spoken in over a year. Not since the falling out at their father's memorial. Long story short, she accused Corinne of being performative, of turning everything into a photo op, and Corinne accused her of being jealous. I stayed out of it. I always stayed out of it. And now here she was, calling me out of the blue like we hadn't just spent the last year pretending each other didn't exist. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, she started, but something happened, and I think you deserve to know. My blood ran cold. She hesitated before continuing. Corinne was careless. I wasn't looking for anything, I swear, but she left her messages open on my iPad when she stayed over last weekend. I saw some things, and then I saw your name. That's when I knew this wasn't just her usual chaos. My grip tightened. She's been seeing someone, a guy named Emmett. But it's not just that. There were pictures, Daryl. She wasn't hiding anything from him. It's like she wanted to be caught, but not by you. By me. She was bragging in her messages to friends, talking about how you were too soft to ever leave her, how she could do what she wanted, and you'd always be waiting at the door like a stray. I swear I could feel my heart physically recoil in my chest. But Naomi wasn't finished. She also said something about the prenup, about how if you filed first, she could flip the story, make it seem like you were the unfaithful one, that she could pull some old pictures of you with your coworker, that girl you used to carpool with, Harper. She said she could make it look like an emotional affair, enough to buy her time and sympathy. I didn't respond. I just sat there, staring through the windshield, watching the world move outside the car as mine disintegrated further with each word. Naomi exhaled hard on the other end. Look, I'm not defending you. I know you weren't perfect, but you loved her, Daryl. I saw it. And she used that. She used you. I don't know why I'm even telling you this except, maybe I'm just sick of watching her burn everyone down and walk away like nothing happened. We ended the call not with resolution, but with a shared silence. A mutual understanding that sometimes blood doesn't mean loyalty, and betrayal doesn't always come in loud explosions. Sometimes, it's a quiet drip, wearing you down until the floor collapses beneath you. That night, I couldn't go home. I slept in my car outside an old motel I used to pass on my way to work. I didn't go inside. I just laid the seat back and stared at the ceiling, wondering how many layers of deception could wrap themselves around a single person before they became unrecognizable. Corinne had crafted an entire performance. Not just cheating, strategy. She had rehearsed her downfall, positioned herself as the victim before I even took a single step toward leaving. And now that I had, she was already rewriting the script. But I still had something she didn't know. A copy of the burner phone's contents. Every message, every photo, every timestamp. I had made sure of it the moment I discovered it. Not for revenge, not for public humiliation, but because I knew she would try to flip the narrative. And now, thanks to Naomi, I knew exactly how far she was willing to go. But what I didn't know, what blindsided me the next morning, was just how many other people were involved. People I trusted. People I confided in. Because the next betrayal? It came from someone I considered my brother. I always used to say I had 3 constants in life: my job, my car, and my best friend, Colby. We met during freshman year of college when he knocked over my tray in the cafeteria and replaced my ruined lunch with a cold slice of pizza and half a can of Sprite. It wasn't much, but it started 2 decades of friendship that felt bulletproof. Colby was the kind of guy who showed up to help you move, remembered your dog's name, and knew when to shut up and just sit with you through silence. When I married Corinne, he was my best man. When his dad died, I flew to Texas and stood beside him at the grave without him even asking. If there was one thing in this mess of a life that I thought I could trust, it was him. So when I saw his name in Corinne's burner phone message history, my first reaction was confusion, not anger, not fear, just pure, blind confusion. The messages weren't flirtatious. At least not at first. They looked like logistics, like check-ins. He's still clueless. You said he's filing first, right? Don't forget what's in that Dropbox. It'll nuke him. Dropbox? Clueless? The more I scrolled, the more the walls closed in. There was a folder link. I followed it using the login that had auto-filled on her device. What I saw inside wasn't photos of her affairs. That would have been almost easier to stomach. What I found were screenshots. Hundreds of them. My text threads. Old Facebook messages from years ago. Email conversations. Work logs. Anything and everything Corinne could scrape up to build a timeline. A twisted, curated, manipulated timeline of my life that painted me as inattentive, emotionally absent, and suspiciously close to a handful of female coworkers. And Colby had helped her gather it. He had been forwarding messages, screenshots, even voicemails that I had left him over the years. Private venting sessions during fights with Corinne. Stupid jokes I'd made. Out-of-context moments that, with the right framing, made me sound like a man halfway out the door long before Corinne ever cheated. It was like watching someone burn down your house, then claim you forgot to lock the door. That night, I didn't go home. I didn't sleep. I didn't cry. I just drove. Mind blank. Streets blurring. At some point, I found myself parked outside Colby's apartment. I didn't even remember turning in. I just knew I had to look him in the eye and ask him why. He opened the door barefoot, holding a bowl of cereal, like it was just another Tuesday. His smile dropped the second he saw me. "Daryl, hey. You look like you've been helping her." My voice cracked in the middle, but I didn't care. He didn't even deny it. He didn't try to lie. He just sighed. "It's not what you think." That phrase. That pathetic, overused phrase that liars everywhere cling to. He tried to explain that Corinne had convinced him I was checked out, that she was trying to gather evidence so she wouldn't be left with nothing, that he was trying to keep it balanced by making sure she didn't go nuclear. He even had the audacity to say he thought he was helping me in some twisted way. "You forwarded my personal messages, Colby," I said. "You gave her fuel to rewrite our entire marriage." He didn't respond, just stood there, mouth slightly open, like he was trying to find a way to spin it. I left before he could. I didn't need more words. Words had already been weaponized enough. On the way back, I stopped at my old storage unit, one I had kept long before Corinne, filled with old journals, photos, backup drives. Proof. Not proof of her guilt, that I already had. I needed proof of myself. My words, my thoughts, my life before she ever started twisting it into something ugly. Because if this thing went to court, and it would, I had to be ready. She wasn't playing checkers. She was playing chess with grenades. But I still had one piece left. One person who had warned me years ago, and I had ignored her. Corinne's mother. There are moments that stitch themselves into your memory with such precision. You remember the color of the sky, the exact pressure of the air, even the sound your shoes made when you stepped onto the porch. That morning, the morning I knocked on Gloria's door, was one of them. The sky was cloudless. The wind was still. My palms were sweating so badly, I had to wipe them on my jeans twice before ringing the bell. She opened the door slower than I expected. Her face held no surprise when she saw me. None. It was like she'd been expecting this day to come, just not knowing when. "Daryl," she said quietly. No smile. No fake pleasantries. Just my name, like a sigh wrapped in years of regret. "Can we talk?" She didn't hesitate. Just stepped aside, and I walked into a home that smelled like old pine wood and lavender. Her living room was as neat as I remembered, but the photos had changed. There used to be wedding pictures of Corinne and me on her shelf. Now they were gone, replaced by a framed painting of a barn and a dusty ceramic angel. She sat down first, and I followed, lowering myself onto the couch like it might collapse beneath the weight of everything I had to say. But I didn't speak right away. Neither did she. It was Gloria who broke the silence. "I warned you, didn't I?" I nodded. "You did." She shook her head slowly, folding her hands in her lap. "And I knew you wouldn't listen. You looked at her the way her father used to look at me, with blind hope and zero suspicion. You thought you could fix what you didn't know was broken." I swallowed hard. "Why didn't you ever tell me the whole truth? Why didn't you just come out and say it?" She looked down at her lap and traced her thumb over her knuckles. "Because no man ever believes a mother when she says her daughter's a hurricane in a sundress. They just think we're bitter, controlling, interfering." She paused, and because I didn't want to believe it either. Not really. Then she stood and walked to an old drawer in the hallway, pulled out a worn envelope, and handed it to me. It was thick, stuffed with letters, printed emails, and clippings. I stared at it for a second, unsure what I was holding. Then I opened the top letter. It was dated 3 years before I even met Corinne. A restraining order, filed by a man in Idaho named Kyle Sanderson. The reason? Repeated harassment, manipulation, threats, and fraudulent bank withdrawals. There were more, not restraining orders, but written statements. Notes from old friends. One from an ex-teacher. Screenshots of messages. One stood out. "Corinne doesn't end relationships. She dismantles people." I sat back against the couch, stunned. You kept all this. She nodded, her voice suddenly more tired than I'd ever heard it. I kept it because I thought one day someone would come looking for answers. You just got there later than I hoped. I flipped through them, one after another. Each sheet chipped away another piece of the illusion I had built around her. Corinne didn't become this. She was this. She didn't fall into infidelity and manipulation. She perfected it. With every partner, every friend, every person who trusted her. Gloria looked at me again, her eyes raw but not unkind. I know she's my daughter, Daryl, but she's also the person who stole $20,000 from her grandmother and blamed it on the nurse. She's the person who faked an assault story in high school just to get out of a math test. She's the person who let her best friend take the fall for vandalism because she needed to protect her image. I've seen her leave destruction like footprints. Why did she marry me then? I asked, half hoping she'd say something comforting. That maybe I'd been the exception. But Gloria just said, because you were easy to fool and even easier to control. You gave her peace. And the second she got bored of peace, she lit the match. I didn't say anything for a long time. Just sat there, gripping that envelope, feeling like a museum visitor staring at the blueprints of my own collapse. I realized something in that moment. The worst betrayals don't come from strangers. They come from people you defended when no one else would. When I left her house, Gloria walked me to the door. Before I stepped outside, she touched my arm and said softly, "Don't try to fix this, Daryl. Just get out, before she turns the world against you." And God help me, I should have listened. But I didn't, because I hadn't yet seen what she'd been preparing for her grand finale. You always think you'll see it coming. The final swing, the knockout punch, the moment they flip the switch and go full scorched earth. But with Corinne, it wasn't one big explosion. It was a slow detonation disguised as coincidence. And by the time I smelled the smoke, everything was already burning. It started with a message from my boss. It wasn't dramatic, just a simple, cold sentence in an email thread we'd used for years. "We need to schedule a conversation regarding recent concerns." Concerns? I checked the thread. Nothing else. No clarification. Just that. My stomach twisted as I reread the sentence 5 times, hoping I'd somehow misunderstood its tone. I hadn't. Something was wrong. Very wrong. An hour later, my access to the company server was restricted. My Slack account logged out. My inbox locked. Then came the call from HR. There were allegations, they said, from a third party. I sat in my car, frozen, barely hearing their voice on speaker as they explained that someone had come forward with claims that I had used my position to engage in inappropriate conversations with junior staff. Screenshots had been submitted. A formal review was being initiated. The air left my lungs. My vision went blurry around the edges. Because I already knew who had done this. I had warned Corinne, months ago, about how sensitive things were at work. About how our company was cracking down hard on anything even remotely resembling misconduct, even if it came down to misinterpreted texts or after-hours banter. She had nodded, said all the right things. She had even comforted me when I stressed about that one coworker, Harper, the one I used to carpool with before COVID. Harper was mentioned in the report, not directly, but she was named in the context of possible favoritism, personal messages, and blurred boundaries. Everything taken wildly out of context. I never touched Harper, never flirted with her. We talked about car maintenance and our shared hatred of yogurt. That was it. But the screenshots, carefully selected, ruthlessly cropped, told a different story. And here's where it gets darker. Those messages had only ever existed on my phone. The same phone Corinne used to borrow when hers died during our trip to Oregon. I felt like my brain had been scooped out and replaced with static. This wasn't just betrayal. This was warfare. She wasn't leaving me. She was burning my name down to the foundation before walking away with a clean slate. And it didn't stop there. My LinkedIn inbox started filling with messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. "Hey man, is this true? Just checking in, saw some stuff online." I checked Facebook. A vague post had gone up on a fake profile using an old photo of me and some twisted caption like, "You think you know someone? Protect your staff. No one deserves to feel unsafe." Thousands of shares. No names. No direct accusations. Just enough. Enough to make people whisper. Enough to make people assume. I confronted her. I broke the rule I told myself I wouldn't. I called her. She answered after 2 rings, her voice flat. "Why?" I asked. Why this? She didn't deny it. Not a single word of protest. I told you, Daryl, she said. You started this when you said lawyer. I'm just finishing it. You wanted war. I brought the fire. You could have just left. But that's not the story people like, she snapped. Do you think anyone cares about a woman just walking away from a bad marriage? They care about damage. About drama. I gave them something to talk about. That was the moment I realized she never wanted peace. Not closure. Not honesty. She wanted a story. One where she could be the survivor. The brave woman who clawed her way out of the arms of a secret monster. And I was her monster now. By the end of the week, I was placed on unpaid leave. HR said they needed time to review, but they were leaning toward clean break. Corporate speak for we don't want this smoke, even if it's fake. I lost 2 freelance contracts as soon as the rumors touched the outer circles of my industry. Just like that, the life I built was crumbling beneath me. My name wasn't mud. It was poison, but I wasn't going to let that be the end. Because buried in her ego, in her desire to be adored, she made one mistake. She kept a record of everything, not on her phone, not in her burner, but on a cloud account she hadn't signed out of, the one she used to sync her writing portfolio. And what I found in that drive, let's just say, it was her own personal script, a document titled Exit Strategy. She didn't just plan her story, she wrote it. The document was 23 pages long, titled in bold letters, Exit Strategy, How to Win When You're the Villain. It read like a manifesto, step-by-step breakdowns of her tactics, timelines, names, conversations she'd pre-planned to provoke, drafted text messages that were never sent. Some were just templates to manipulate people into defending her. Others were full-on scripts of how to cry on command if confronted. And the wildest part? She had written versions of this story, my story, from her perspective. Fictionalized, of course, but close enough that it sent chills down my spine. In her files, I was the cold, neglectful husband, the gaslighter, the monster. She was creating an alibi for an emotional crime she hadn't just committed. She engineered it. But her vanity saved me, because she backed it all up to a cloud account under her real name. And when I realized she had used work Wi-Fi to sync that drive months ago, my lawyer's eyes lit up. Evidence. We packaged everything. The messages, the Dropbox, the exit strategy, and submitted it to my employer's legal department through a third party. I never had to say a word to HR again. The damage was done, but now the truth had a voice too. Within a week, I received an apology from my company and was fully reinstated. The false claims were dismissed, and the online rumors traced back to the burner IP addresses. Most of them led to proxies, but a few were careless. A few were hers. She had overplayed her hand, and I wasn't the only one who walked away from her. Colby, the friend who betrayed me, sent a pathetic apology email after he realized Corinne had lied to him, too. She told him I was planning to frame her for cheating just to get out of alimony. That's why he got involved, or so he claimed. Doesn't matter now. He's blocked. Corinne? Last I heard, she's taking time to reflect after being asked to leave a writing collective she'd just joined. Turns out, planning your husband's social death on Google Docs isn't the creative writing portfolio they were looking for. As for me, I'm not going to pretend like I walked away unscarred. That'd be a lie. The betrayal, the humiliation, the loneliness, they cut deep. But I walked away awake. For the first time in years, I'm not walking on eggshells. I'm not trying to prove I'm worthy of basic respect. I'm not waiting to be chosen by someone who was never truly mine. I got my life back. I moved into a new place, away from the old memories. Got a dog named Walter. He doesn't cheat, doesn't lie, and always looks thrilled when I walk through the door. And every morning, I write something, not about her, about me, about healing, about how sometimes survival doesn't look like revenge, it looks like peace. So if you're still reading this, I'll leave you with this. Don't wait for the fire to reach your feet before you run. Some people will never love you the way you deserve, not because you're unlovable, but because they don't know how to love without control. Thanks for sticking with me through this chaos. And now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that completely flipped your world upside down and came out stronger because of it? Drop it in the comments. I want to read your story too. And if you enjoyed this confession, make sure to like, subscribe, and follow for more raw, real stories right here on Reddit Confessions, where the truth always finds a way out. Until next time, take care of your heart. You only get one.